everybody, I have a card to share with you today. This card was actually inspired by a photo I saw of a cookie on Instagram. So if you stick around to the end of the video, I will show you the photo of the cookie. So I'm going to start out right off the bat with a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 inches wide by 11 inches long. This is scored at 5 1/2 inches, and I'm going to go ahead and fold this in half, and I'm going to use my crease tool to actually just get that crease nice and tight on there because I want it to look very nice and crisp. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside, and I have my card base next. This is a piece of cardstock that is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. This is whipped cream cardstock as well. And I have actually dry embossed this using the Love Letter embossing folder. This embossing folder is available as a bloom benefit from the annual catalog. I have a Cool Pool heart that I have cut out. I used the heart felt die set as well as the heart piercing elements die set to cut this heart out, and I used the second largest dies in each of those sets. I have a strip of vellum here that is 3/4 inches tall. It doesn't matter how wide it is as long as it will wrap around your card front. So then I'm moving on to my stamp set. I have the Everyday Script stamp and die set, and I've actually gone ahead and stamped that onto some whipped cream cardstock and heat embossed it with gold embossing powder, and then die cut that out. And I also have a summer branch die that I have cut out of lemongrass cardstock. So I'm going to actually be cutting that die cut apart, so you don't need the full die cut for that particular part, or for this particular card. So I have a punch cartridge that I'm using here. This is the Love Is punch cartridge, and I'm just showing you how if you match those flowers up, you can insert it into your punch handle, and it's very secure once it's in that punch handle. So you can go ahead and then punch whatever you need to punch. I'm using some bubblegum cardstock here, and I'm punching out the Love Is hearts. I need 6 of the bubblegum small hearts. And I need 3 of the Sweet Berry medium-size hearts with that. So I went ahead and punched these all out, and I'm using my media tray there. It's really handy to keep little tiny punches and die cuts put in one place while you're working. So I'm pulling in some inks here. I have Watermelon Fusion ink as well as Cranberry Bliss ink, and I'm going to be using some small daubers with sponge applicators on them. And I'm going to be inking the points of these hearts. So I'm just separating them out, and you can see where I had a little fumble there with the watermelon. It's okay though, it went on the Sweet Berry, so it blends in pretty well. So go ahead and just start inking the points of this. I don't want to ink the entire way up the heart. I just want to go about halfway with it, and I want the deepest color to be right at the point of the heart. So I'm just very lightly in small circular motions sponging that ink onto these hearts. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you take your sponge applicator and you put it directly onto the heart after you've inked it up, you are going to leave a solid circle, even if you start making circles after you've put it down. So when you go to ink something, if you want a soft edge, put your sponge applicator down off your cardstock and then use the small circular motions to blend your ink up onto your cardstock. Don't actually put the inked up sponge directly on the cardstock to start out with. So I'm going to go ahead and continue these and just get them all inked up. Switching now over to the Cranberry Bliss ink onto the Sweet Berry cardstock. Okay, now it's time to start assembling our flowers. I'm using Journey Craft glue here. Any liquid glue would work really well with this. And I'm putting just the tiniest dab right there on the point of the heart. So I'm going to take a second one of the hearts and I'm going to put the points together, just kind of slightly overlapping with the point. I want to leave a little V of space between the actual rounded portions of the hearts. I'm putting this together to look like a little pansy flower. So I'm going to add that third heart just right on the top and press it together really good so that it'll stick really well there. And I'm just kind of fiddling with it. That's one of the beauties of using liquid glue, is that you have a little bit of dry down time, so you can kind of fuss with things if you want to get them lined up just right. So I'm trying to get the point of the heart on top to line up with where the two hearts below it are overlapping. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to do that with the bubblegum hearts. This is going to make 3 separate flowers, 1 of the sweet berry and 2 of the bubblegum. So once I have these all glued together, I'm actually going to let them set for just a couple of minutes. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes just to make sure that the glue is actually completely dry and set on those. So now I'm going to come in with my bloom tool, and I have the large ball tip on my bloom tool. And some of you might recognize Taz. He's been around for a few videos. I'm going to be using Taz as a base to put my flowers under, so I can actually add a little bit of a curve to the petals of my flowers. So I do this by turning the flower upside down and rubbing the large ball tip of my bloom tool into the curved portions of the hearts. So that'll make the petal curve downward. So then I turn the flower over and I use the same tip and I just press in the center of the flower, and that will make the middle sink down and it'll give that flower a little bit of depth and life. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with all 3 flowers on this. So any mouse pad will work. You don't have to have Taz, but Taz has just been around for a long time and he's a good buddy in my craft room. He makes about as big of a mess as I do. So once I have all these flowers ready, I'm going to go ahead and pull in the centers for this flower. So I'm just going to go ahead and use some pearls and just put some pearls in the center of the flowers. The center of the flower is where that top heart point is. So it's not actually center, it's a little bit lower than center. So now I'm going to go ahead and work on my card front just a little bit here. I am going to take some medium foam squares and I'm going to attach them to the back of the heart. Now this heart is actually wider than my card front, so I'm going to offset it on my card front. So I'm not going to put the foam squares all the way to the edge on the side that's going to overlap the card. And so I'm going ahead and putting some foam squares. I use a lot of foam squares. I like my card to stay intact. Taking off the backing on those, and then I'm going to place that onto my dry embossed card front. And you can see I just lined it up a little bit on the high side, but then I have it overlapping on that left edge. So I'm going to take my Grand Pro scissors. These are nice long scissors, and I'm just going to use the edge of that card base to use it as a guide to cut off the excess cool pool. So now I'm using some small foam squares, and I'm going to put these on the back of 2 of the flowers. So not all 3, because I want to give this a little bit of dimension to it, but on 2 of the flowers I'm putting a little foam square on. And then I am going to just kind of figure out my layout here of how I want to have these flowers on this heart. So now I'm going to, the one that does not have a foam square, I'm using a little bit of craft glue on the back side to just adhere that down where I want it. And then I can take the backing off of the foam squares from the other 2 flowers and just set them in place. So now you're going to see why I said we won't use that full die cut. I'm actually just going to snip off a couple of little leaves and then one little branch from the die cut. And I'm going to use a little bit of Journey craft glue and just kind of fit those in to my little flower cluster, just where they look good. So I lifted up the petal of the flower so I could tuck it underneath. I just want to make sure that where the raw edge is, where I cut it off of the branch, is covered up by the flower. And tucking in that branch that has that little flower cluster finished. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my vellum strip and wrap that around my card. So I fold over the edges on the vellum so that I don't have any glue that shows, and I put them on the back of the card, and I have a little cheater method that I use. Rather than using glue on it, I use a little bit of Scotch tape. Now, the reason that I use the Scotch tape is because if I need to actually pull that off to straighten it out or to maybe move the element down a little bit, I actually have the ability to do that, and I don't have that adhered down permanently at that point. So this is an element that I can move around if I need to. If I got it too close to the flowers and that sentiment's not fitting in there, then I could do that. So I'm using some Journey craft glue to just adhere my die cut sentiment across the top of that vellum. And that is going to need a little bit to dry because that die cut's going to want to try and curl up. So what you're going to see me do here is I'm actually going to take my punch cartridge that I used, and on the flat side of it, I'm just going to put that right on top of that die cut and let that dry. So I let that dry for a couple of minutes, and then now I'm coming back in and I need to add a little bit of something in here. So I'm going to pull in some pearls, and I'm just going to kind of randomly place these pearls in with the flowers just to add a little bit of dot to this. Now that I have my flower cluster the way that I want, I'm going to come back in with my Journey craft glue, and I'm going to glue my card front onto my card base. And this looks like I'm using a lot of glue, but it's a very thin layer that I'm actually putting down on there. I have an easier time lining up my card front on my card base if I open the card up. That's a little trick that I picked up from a YouTube video a long time ago, and it has worked really well for me in terms of being able to line things up a little better. So that's the card finished up there. And as I promised, there's the cookie. And so this was actually done by Sweet Sugar Belle, and I'll leave a link in the description below to her Instagram where I had seen that card. So anyway, thanks for watching, and you have a wonderful day. Much love to you all. Bye.